Hello and welcome to Mile High Reefers. I'm Scott Anderson, and today I want to talk about quarantine. It's something that's been frustrating me lately, and I've got loads of ideas, I've got input from other people, and I just want to kind of put it out there and see what kind of comments you had. So here's what happened. I think most of you know this, but just to recap. My Chevron Tang that I bought in December, right before Christmas, died from marine velvet. Now, he was in my quarantine tank, and while it sucked losing $150 fish, it wasn't that big of a deal because it was in quarantine. Had he been in this display, I'll bet you every clown would be dead in that tank right now. Every tang. Maybe the wrasses, maybe the Mandarin goby would have survived, but marine velvet is nasty. So this has been a frustration, right? Basically, the way I did it was I was just kind of annoyed. I said I wasn't buying fish for a while. So after that Chevron Tang died, I soaked the tank in copper. I went way over the normal dose, right? Because marine velvet's as nasty as it gets. I didn't even count drops. I just squirted a bunch in. Actually, I went to the normal dose and then I squirted a bunch extra in. I wanted this stuff gone. And it has sat for a month. Now I've got the tank completely cleaned out. It's completely empty. I do have the sand in the bottom. It's a bit damp, but I got a fan on it, drying it out. I want that sand dead. One thing I could do that I didn't do was bleach everything. My thought is all of the copper on there, all of the dryness is going to kill the marine velvet parasites. I could be wrong, but I think it's going to go away. So what's kind of going on is I talked to my local LFS today, and the guy I talked to, I totally respect. He's an awesome guy. I've been shopping at his store for a long time. But his philosophy is very different than mine. So what his philosophy is he is very much on the biological biosphere type thing, right? You just keep the healthiest water conditions possible, you put the right fish in, you do all this kind of stuff, and you'll keep it down, you'll keep all this kind of stuff. Now, while I was there, I saw two tangs with ick. A little disappointing. One was a naso, one was a powder blue. I really want a naso, so kind of disappointing, right? I can't buy that fish. It's got ick on it. I'm not gonna buy it. So part of what the owner of the LFS is thinking is every tank has ick, right? It's just a parasite that lives in everything, and it's unstoppable. And there's a bunch of other pests out there. There's internal flukes and all kinds of stuff that you're trying to quarantine for and hopefully get rid of. But his thought is everything has ick. Well, I don't know if every system actually has ick. Obviously, if you build a brand new system with dry rock and sand, there is no ick in that system. If you put a fish in there, assuming the fish doesn't bring ick in, there's no ick in that system. If you run a system without fish for months, the ick can't survive because ick needs a host to feed off of. So without a fish in the system, there can't be ick in the system. Now what the real amount of time that is could vary. I mean, maybe one or two parasites can survive for an extreme amount of time. I really don't personally know. But that's his thinking is basically everybody's going to end up with it. So just do your best to keep the fish fed, right? So the best foods you can give them, garlic, ginger, all this kind of stuff. Do whatever you can do to prevent ick in the tank, and you introduce the fish right into the tank. One of the other points he brought up, and I think he's actually right, is that many fish die in quarantine that would have lived if they were put directly into the tank. Now, it's true, and I think from an individual tank perspective that the quarantine system is somewhat detrimental. But for the tank as a whole, I think the quarantine process is incredibly beneficial, right? So, I mean, imagine if you were to put a person with Ebola in a prison without any way to take people out. You would then expect that Ebola to spread within the prison, right? It would just go everywhere. My suspicion is it's the exact same thing with a fish tank. You put a fish in with a contagious disease, there's no way for the fish to get away from it. And that disease is going to continue to spread until it runs its course. That scares me. Marine velvet is one of those diseases that can wipe out your tank incredibly fast. But he's dead right? A fish that you acclimate and put into a system like this is going to stress less than a fish that you put into a system that's bare bottoms with an air stone in it and a heater. So that's completely right. I totally get that. The other downside is every time that fish goes to the bathroom, it's going to produce ammonia. And as the ammonia is produced, it's going to build up toxic levels. Now, no ammonia is healthy, and they can tolerate little tiny bits. But basically, every time they pee, they start poisoning themselves. It's terrible. And in a normal system, or just a glass system with an air stone, you've got no way to export that ammonia, right? Because you don't have a nitrogen cycle. You don't have that biological process of ammonia being changed from ammonia to nitrite, which is less dangerous than the ammonia, to nitrate, which is even less dangerous. That just doesn't exist. So you end up with the most dangerous chemical building up in your tank rather quickly. Plus, you got very little. Maybe you got a couple pieces of PVC for that fish to hide in, right? But these fish are wild caught. They're directly from the ocean. Their native environment looks much more like this. It looks nothing like a glass tank. So that is a worry. So the process that I have tried is where I put the sand in the bottom, and then I put the PVC in, and I get a nitrogen cycle. And when you dose the cupramine for copper, that doesn't kill your nitrogen cycle. That's what it says in the cupramine bottle, and I've never experienced it happening. Problem is when you get marine velvet, it contaminates everything, which is why I'm so scared right now to run my current system. Because one little tiny egg of that being in there could hatch, attach, spread, and regrow until I have a plague of marine velvet in that tank again. Which is why I'm just taking my time and redoing it. So the main problem one of the big problems with my system is I've got a really slow turnover when everything goes wrong. This isn't necessarily bad, but it is annoying. And I still don't have really anything great. The fish still don't look happy in there. So potentially there's something I could do with aquascaping to make it a little better, plastic plants or plastic rocks, something to make it look nice that I could then remove if I need to treat. Wouldn't even be really necessary to remove them. The other thing that was brought up to me by him is a product called Safety Stop. Now this is some old stuff that I have laying around. I got it at a reef show years ago, and it's basically formalin and methylene blue. Now these are old school fish treating chemicals. So actually I think this, in combined with a quarantine tank, could be brilliant, right? If you were to dose your fish or treat your fish with this product before you put it in your quarantine tank, you would reduce the risk of the fish having a disease in the tank, which could potentially make my system more successful. So the other thing that's slightly annoying is I went to a lot of fish stores lately, and a lot of fish don't look very good. It's obvious the local stores don't quarantine, and I go in and I see powder blues with ick, and I don't like that. I see nasos with ick. I see really sick looking fish. They're not being treated properly in the stores. Now, the regular fish stores do an okay job. I mean, it's not like every fish is healthy, and I completely get why, right? These guys are getting fish directly from the wild. They're coming in, they're putting them in their tank, and they're trying to get a quick turnaround, right? Because that fish costs them money. They need to sell it to make more money. I get that. But the other thing I'm wondering is, and this is what I'd love to see comments on, would you guys pay a premium to have pre-quarantined fish? And would you trust that, right? I mean, if you had bought a fish from a pet store that looked fantastic, and you were told that it was quarantined for a month, and it looked great, would you pay a premium for that fish? Because I would. Because I saw some pretty premium priced fish that looked like crap. I saw a little tiny purple tang, $279, covered in it. Come on, people, that fish should be in a hospital tank. That thing needs to be in copper. I mean, that's a wonderful fish, and it's probably gonna die. Why? So then this kind of brings up, what would that system need to look like, right? Because if you do glass bottoms, it's not very healthy for the fish, and it's going to take a tremendous amount of water changes. You're going to be giving this thing 20-30% water changes every day to keep those ammonia levels in check. That's a huge amount of salt, and that's a huge expense when you start doing it in mass volumes like a fish store would have to do. So that would be a consideration. You really would need to design something with some sort of biological filtration. Of course, you don't want to treat the whole tank with a copper medication, the whole system with a copper medication. So do you run a bunch of individual systems, or do you have a bunch of tanks that you can shut off? Do you have all your drains running through a UV sterilizer and hopefully remove it before it gets back up into the systems if you use a fully connected? And that's where it gets a little iffy, right? Because having a bunch of individual tanks means that you're going to have a back filter on each one. You're probably not going to be able to put a skimmer on everything. That's going to get really pricey. You'll be looking at $400 or $500 a tank. So it gets kind of crazy. So what would that system have to look like? I'm sure people have done it, but there's got to be an effective way to quarantine fish where we don't stress them out crazily. So I want to be able to bring a fish home. I want to be able to quarantine it. I want it to not be able to stress out so much. And I want to be able to treat it when things go wrong. So that's what I'm trying to build in my head, is what that system should look like. So if you watch one of my videos on an easier quarantine setup, that's kind of my most recent setup. But what I'd love to hear are your ideas. How do we get from the shit systems we currently have, because we have to quarantine, at least in my opinion. There's going to be some naysayers out there. How do we get from this system to a good system where we can put fish in and expect good results? I want to be able to go get a fish and either put it in half dose coppers in a nice looking thing with a nice biological filtration on it, or something so that this is cost effective and nice. So that's the challenge. How do we do that? Anyways, thanks for watching this episode of Mile High Reefers. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't have any answers here. So in the comments column, please tell me what you think, like and subscribe.